These are a sailing boat product. They're called reefing hooks actually, but I put them here because I do a lot of fly leader tying, and they are absolutely, I could probably tow the boat with these things, and I can swivel them where they're underneath the step, where they're completely out of the way. But when I'm tying my leaders, I can actually sit here, have my leaders right here, and I can tie up the complete leader system with those hooks, because in order to do a Hofnagel knot and some of the other knots we tie with the fly systems, you've got to have an absolutely rigid base to tie your knots on. Yep. This happens to be here because we just built a couple of these snooters, something I designed about, I don't know, close to 20 years ago, to help us control a billfish at the boat. It's actually a Veltex foam, like a rod butt, but it holds the bill of the fish in that crotch quite nicely, especially if the fish cooperates. But it'll help us control the fish without hurting it, so we can get the hooks out. These rod holders right here that you see with the PVC tubes, that's for our fly rods. We'll have 4 fly rods ready to cast at any given time here.
Is that right?
And we'll have one with a big fly, excuse me, one with a large fly and a slightly heavier outfit, like what we would probably call a blue marlin outfit. And then the other 3 would have would be more the size for sails or smaller marlin, like stripes or whites, depending on where we are. But they would have a combination of different flies. It'd have at least one streamer, and sometimes the fish prefer a streamer that'll be underneath the surface. Sometimes they are attracted more effectively with a surface lure with a popper on it. This is something I wanted to incorporate for my workstation out here, because this is pretty much where I'm going to be doing a lot of my work. Don't have our small tackle boxes in there, but this is pretty cool. My tools aren't there, but these are the tools that I'll be working with during the course of the day, with my mono cutters, my crimpers, a pair of small needle nose vice grips, and these little recessed bowls right here. I'll rig my flies with a plastic bead. I do a lot of crimping instead of wasting time with knots in certain positions, and maybe even have different size sleeves here. A knife right here, and then anything that's left over that I need a place for, it's up here. And as you can see, it's high density foam.
Nice.
So that's spring loaded. It's not going anywhere. So during the course of the day, that's where it's going to be, right there. This is the way I hang my dredge lures.
Oh wow!
All strung up on some mono. This is one of my fly tying benches here that keep stored out of the way for tying splices and putting leaders together.
Okay.
It just comes off,
I got you.
and then I can just sit down like this, and these clamps, I can clamp my fly line in here with my Dacron splices. It's a little bit complicated, but see, to do it right, you've got to have 100% all the way through your system. So we use a lot of splices, and the knots we use are 100%, with the combination of biminis and connecting the biminis with a Hofnagel. Yeah. But this basically is to help me to do the splicing the Dacron loops on my fly line and on the fly line end of my butt section. Sort of unconventional, but I've got to have access to my rods, and as you can see, we keep 6 fly rods stored inside. Even in 6-foot seas, those rods, even though they have no tip support, they don't move. I designed those rod holders after I had a trip in Venezuela on a charter boat down there, and I took a suction cup mounted rod holder similar to that PVC right there, and because there was no place to carry the rods, and I just suctioned it to the inside of the side window just to get it out of the way, and the rod never moved, and it was rough. And I thought, good God, that's amazing. That rod just sits there. I scratched my head a bit and came up with the overhead storage ideas, and it's been very successful for us. And here's how easy they are to access.
Yeah.
With the exception of the blue marlin rod, which is out there, which we have 3 of,
Yeah.
they're all Sage RPL X blanks, which they haven't made in 20 years, but they're the best blanks ever. They're bulletproof, and they've got a lot of backbone, but they still cast, and so they didn't even make a 4-piece rod back, I think, when they were making the RPLXs. But some of these I scrambled to get any one I could get my hands on that was a 12, 13, or 14 weight. And we end up with, I think I've got about 15 of them, of these blanks. And they're outstanding rods. These two closest to you here are 13 weights, and I use those for casting. If we got some fish on the surface feeding on schooled bait, we'll use these rods because they cast a little bit better, and typically I'll have a tarpon. In fact, you can see it. That's actually a very slow sinking tarpon line that I cut back to about 60 feet long because it casts better, and it'll help shoot a big bulky fly out there which has a lot of wind resistance.